It's Jasmine here. Today is tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary, but today is the 1 year anniversary of the day before my brain surgery. Why that's memorable. So the day before your brain surgery for DBS, you have to go off of your Parkinson's medication. And so going off of the medication was really hard because they want you to be kind of at your worst during the surgery so they can see the changes. But going off my medication, I just decided to keep myself as busy as possible. And so all day I was doing stuff, running around. I sewed a blanket. That was one of my big things that I did before the surgery to keep myself occupied. But so the surgery. What I really wanted to do was take a video, take a second to actually talk about in depth sort of what the surgery was like on the inside. The one sort of remarkable thing about deep brain stimulation surgery is because you're awake, you do remember the entire surgery. And so there's definitely nothing in the world that can prepare you for being awake during your own brain surgery. That's just, not something that I could ever prepare anyone for. But I definitely hope this gives a little bit of a glimpse into what the surgery was like. So fast forward to the morning of, so the day before I had, taken myself off meds. I stayed up all night because how do you sleep before brain surgery? I mean, I stayed up all night. Thank God, my now fiance, he helped me stay up all night. We watched Orange is the New Black all night. And then it was 4 o'clock in the morning and I had to get up to go to the hospital to have brain surgery. My check-in time was 5:30. We left here around 4:30. We were getting all ready, and then you go in, and I remember this distinctly because they were like, do you want me to drop you off at the curbside? And I was like, no, I can do it, because that's just who I am. So I walked all the way from the parking garage to the hospital because I was stubborn. I would not let them put me in a wheelchair, even though I was, I wanted to do this. I wanted to walk in for my brain surgery, even though I was a huge mess. And so the nurse who was admitting me had the hospital bracelet, and she held it out, and my arm was like this. I was just like, I could barely hold it up, and she was just like, are you okay? And I was like, no, but I will be. That's why I'm here. And then my whole family and my now fiance, we sat in this sort of circular waiting thing they had, and then they called me back, and so I went back into the back waiting part of the surgery unit. And the whole thing, they got me in the bed, they did the whole admitting thing, and then when it was finally time to go back, I said goodbye, and they wheeled me back to a room. It wasn't the OR yet, and that was the room where they were going to drill the cage on my head. And so the cage, I should preface this now by saying if you are squeamish, don't keep watching. But the cage is like this metal thing that goes around your head. It's called halo, and they drill it into 4 parts. I can still point to the parts on my head where they drilled this thing. And so they hold it up to you, and they draw little X's on your head, and they literally just give you a numbing shot. Like it's not anything fancy. You're not asleep for this. I mean, they give you a little bit of Twilight, so you're kind of woozy, but you still remember the whole thing. So they give you a numbing shot, and then they drill 4 screws into your head. And I sort of remember sitting there being like, is this really happening? It's a very surreal feeling. And so once they finally got that on your head, you feel a little bit like Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster for all the English nerds. And so they take you back to the CT room. So they put you, I somehow had to get from the gurney to the table of the CT with the cage on my head. And so they had like a couple people come behind me and help lifting me from the gurney to the CT table. So I'm finally on there, you go back, you go through the whole CT thing, and they managed to get you back on the gurney. And then they finally take you up to the OR. So I remember, going around and having them pushing me, and I have glasses, so I couldn't really see what was going on, but I could kind of see it. I was a little blurry. And then they take you up to the 5th floor, and they finally wheel you into the OR. And then it's another transfer of this whole thing where they have to kind of pick you up plus the cage. And that's the part where they actually drill the cage into the table. And so the reason that they do that is so that you're completely, perfectly still. And so, then they do all the things they need to do to prep you for surgery. And during this whole time, you're kind of awake. The medicine sort of makes you a little loopy to the point where you don't really know what's going on, but or not you know what's going on, but you don't really have a sense of time, if that makes sense. Time is going by very fast, so that really helps. But so then it's finally time for them to cut open your head, and so the first thing you hear is you hear them shaving. They shave. For me, it was the left side I did first. I did it unilaterally, so I had a year ago tomorrow, I had the left side and the battery done, and then it was sort of pre-wired. Both wires were put in place, and then 6 months later in December, I had the right side done. So then they shave a patch of your head about this big here, and then they literally give you another numbing shot, like at the dentist's office, for them to start making the incision. And I always require way more numbing shots than average people, so I remember, being kind of like, ow. I was like, can you give me another shot, please? And so, they did that. And then it's actually time for them to drill a hole. And I actually had this, they give you antibiotics while you're doing this, and they accidentally gave me the antibiotic I'm allergic to. And so I remember he has my head cut open, he's about to drill a hole, and my whole body's itchy, and I'm literally like clawing at my skin, kind of like, help, can you do something? And so they realize I'm having a bad allergic reaction, so they give me Benadryl, and finally that stops, and I'm like, okay, you can drill your hole now. And so then I remember, they drill the hole, and it's a lot of pressure, and then when it finally gets there, you kind of hear a pop inside your head, which is pretty freaky, but that's sort of how they know they're in, and how you know they're in. And then they do the part where they cut back the meninges, and you can't feel anything when they're doing this. I only know they're cutting back the meninges because I read the technical manual. And so I was sitting there. That's how I sort of separated myself from the surgery, was I read the technical manual, so I knew all the steps, and I had it in a very scientific way, so where I wasn't, having brain surgery. I was reading about it almost when I was there, and that's sort of how I dealt with it. But so, I remember talking to the surgeon, like, oh, now you're cutting back my meninges, and he's kind of like, how do you know that? Well, So he's doing that. And then finally it's time for them to put the electrode in. This is the part that actually takes quite a bit of time, but I didn't really feel that because the medicine sort of gave you this sort of sense of time being lost, where it's just things are happening, but you don't really realize how long it's happening for. So, finally they're doing that whole thing where they insert the electrode. And the computer actually generates it. Like, the surgeon gets close and the computer will correct it before they put it in. So that way it's exact. They know they're going to exactly the right spot. They're not going to hit anything bad, They're not going to accidentally destroy your sense of speech or anything. They have this down. So, he puts it in just the right place to get just the right target. He goes in. And then he said, okay, we're going to turn it on. And so, at this point, because I hadn't had meds, my body was not cooperating at all. I was so rigid, I could barely lift my shoulder much higher than like this. It was just shaking, and I was so tight, and my muscles were just spasming, and they were locked, and I was just really not doing too hot. So, then he had me do different motor tests. They had me do this. They had me tap my foot, and my foot tap was sort of this just horrible, shaky, uncoordinated mess. And I couldn't just do this. It was like this sort of like choppy tap, and then they turn it on, and it takes them a little bit of time, but once they finally get just the right spot, when they turn it on, it's like this immediate, oh my goodness. So my left arm just sort of woke up again, and so all of a sudden I was just sort of looking at my arm like, this is amazing, and that's what I kept saying over and over again, like, this is amazing, I can do this. And they said, okay, point to the anesthesiologist, and I sort of, pointed up ahead, and they had me tapping my fingers, and I could do that, and I could tap my fingers, and I was just sort of sitting there with my head drilled into this cage, like, oh my goodness, I could tap my foot, like, I could lift my foot up and down. It was just one of the most incredible feelings that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And of course, then they have to turn it up too high, so that they know that you're, that they're, not just that they know, they sort of know parameters for when, about 30 days later is when they go in and actually program your battery so that you have the, the right setting for you. This is sort of just a setting that's sort of, a temporary thing just to make sure it's working. But then they'll go in and fine tune it to make sure that all the right things are happening for you. But when they turned it on, or when they turned it up too high, I felt like I was having a stroke. Half my face fell, and my arm just fell, and it felt like it was really heavy, and I just could not move, and I was kind of like, hey, like, can you fix this? It was almost comical in a way. But then they turn it back to where it's working, and it's kind of just, you get back to this amazing feeling, and so they sort of play around with it for a little bit to make sure they've got it right. And so then they know for sure that they're at the right spot, and they also know that it's going to help you, which is amazing. Because then I knew that, okay, the next couple weeks were going to be really hard. I was going to be recovering from brain surgery, and it wasn't going to be turned on. I was going to have a honeymoon period afterwards. When you wake up, you're still feeling all right. You have this slight honeymoon period where it's like, because the way the brain swells around the electrodes, which if you think about it is kind of weird, but the way the brain swells around the electrodes, they know that, or there's sort of like this fake turned on feeling. So you feel like your battery's on even though it's not. So that lasted me about 2 weeks after I woke up from surgery. It was like I was programmed for about 2 weeks, and then about a week and a half to 2 weeks, it was like sort of a steep cliff that by the time I got programmed, I was back to being sort of this, very much looking like I was in stage 4 again. But it was, for that moment, when they do that, then once they have that all done, and you feel great, you feel it turned on, it's gonna work, and then they say, okay, we're gonna put the battery, we're gonna put the electrodes in, or the wires in, so we'll knock you out for that. And then they knocked me out. I was under general anesthesia, and then I woke up screaming in pain. But that's sort of the recovery of brain surgery. The recovery is hard. It really, really hurt. I took this picture that I posted on Facebook with my sister that day, and we sort of joked that picture was the biggest lie ever, because I was just like, yeah, yay, I woke up from brain surgery, but that was like the 5 minutes that medication was working, and I was sort of okay, but then the rest of that day was awful. So, I'll never lie about that. Brain surgery hurts a lot, but the results are incredible. I mean, yeah, the first couple days were just really hard, but then 5 days later, I took a video where I was walking, because my honeymoon period was working. I was moving, and I felt good for the first time in years. And then, that whole thing fell off, and the honeymoon wore off, and I was back to where I was. But when they turned it on, and programmed it, I felt good again. DBS surgery gave me my life back. I was so sick before, and now I can do all of these things. And so, that sort of gave me the sort of passion to talk about this surgery and talk about my experiences. So hopefully, if you're watching this and you're going to have DBS soon, it's going to be kind of a pretty hard battle, but it's going to be so worth it in the end when you can move freely. And yeah, it does not solve all of Parkinson's problems at all. I mean, there's still quite a few challenges I have. I never sort of downplay how bad my pain syndrome that I've developed because of Parkinson's is. And I don't downplay how bad the intestinal stuff and my inability to eat is, but having DBS was 100% worth it, and it giving me back my motor function has just been like the most amazing miracle that's ever happened to me. So that's my surgery experience, and that's what I wanted to share on the anniversary of the day before my brain surgery. So thanks for watching.